Welcome, and thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Digital Dilemmas. This week, we wanted to kick it off by talking about the symbiotic relationship between this podcast and John's relatively new Substack publishing.
Digital Dilemmas is a Lenk Media original podcast. Yeah, so to support our work here on Digital Dilemmas and get the word out through other mediums, I've started a Substack channel, I guess they call it. It's called John Murphy Media, and it's easily found, johnmurphymedia.substack.com, where we publish about 2 articles per week, sometimes 3. On the same topics that we discuss here on the podcast. And I hope that people will go out there and subscribe. You can even you can hear and connect to the podcast from a podcast link we have on the channel. And as we go forward, we're going to have some guest contributors. That's what I'd like to do. Every now and then we'll have somebody who's an expert in a space who would like to publish a piece that aligns with our objectives on John Murphy Media. We're going to have them write some articles. So looking forward to getting that going. It's been out there about 3 weeks now, and we're doing very well and hope to do more. Look forward to doing more. Anyway, I just finished, and what I want to talk about today is I just finished a 4-part series on what I think is a really important piece of information that aligns with what we talk about here, which is, technology and its impact on culture. Did a 4-part series on a gentleman named Curtis Yarvin. And I want to talk about Curtis today and shed some light on him. So with
Curtis
that,
Yarvin, why should I care?
why should you care? So as we know in the news, we're about 4 weeks into the Trump administration. And a lot of people, let's say that about half the people out there, just for the sake of the argument, half of the people supported Donald Trump, half did not. Let's just say the country is split fairly evenly, just for the sake of argument. And then as we watch the first 4 weeks of the administration, I think a lot of people, whether you like or dislike what he's done so far, I don't want to get into that yet. What I want to do and why you should care about Curtis Yarvin and what I want to talk about is what Donald Trump is doing and what Elon Musk is doing is not just them being like gunslingers and, crazy and just coming up with random ideas to shake things up and, President Trump's just being crazy today, or we like what he did or we didn't like what he did, but, we like the fact that, he's got that machismo. What I want to talk about is that there's a gentleman named Curtis Yarvin. He's a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. He's in his 50s, has been influencing people like Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and a lot of other Silicon Valley oligarchs who like his writings. He's been writing for about 20 years. Nobody knew about him. Probably nobody cared, but he's been writing, and we're going to talk about what his theories are and how he's influencing Project 25, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and what we're seeing happening weeks 1 through 4 or 5, however long Trump's been in office, 2.0, is not a coincidence. This is part of the Curtis Yarvin playbook. And I think it's important when you ask, why should I care? Well, if weeks 1 through 5 have been executing the Curtis Yarvin playbook, we may want to look at the playbook to see what's coming, because they seem to be following it and connecting the dots spot on. So, and I think when we start shining the light on Curtis Yarvin, we're going to start to see where Donald Trump and Elon Musk are going. And I suspect It doesn't matter whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. What matters is if you're not one of the ultra wealthy, this will matter to you. So that's why Curtis Yarvin matters.
Okay, well, I mean, tell me even more specifically. Like, break it down for me. What's his philosophy?
All right, so this may take a little time, so bear with me. So Curtis Yarvin believes that democracy no longer works and that our country should be reshaped, go through a period that he calls the Dark Enlightenment, where democracy ends and is replaced by a corporate structure, so that the head of the government is something similar to a CEO, a monarch, or a king. Part of his belief is that democracy is a bad idea because Yarvin does not believe that all people are created equal. His belief, and that's called egalitarianism, his belief is that not everybody is equal. There are certain people who should be at the top, and everyone else should have subservient roles. So he challenges the whole concept of everyone's created equal, democracy's a bad idea, and he's come up with some very specific plans as to how to make this happen. Now, the New York Times did an interview with him a couple years ago that's now starting to see the light of day. So let me just give you a couple examples that are specific. And I'm going to quote the New York Times article. He believes that government bureaucracy should be radically gutted, and perhaps most provocative, he argues that American democracy should be replaced by what he calls a monarchy, by a CEO or a dictator.
But he calls it a monarchy?
He in his writings, he calls it a monarchy, he calls it a dictatorship, he calls it a CEO. He likes to see it be more corporate-like, which means people like Musk, this whole DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, that whole team, was in a sense designed by Curtis Yarvin. Yarvin wants a streamlined, centralized authority. That's all that government should be, and that only the few should have the money. Everybody else, not so much.
And how do you decide who the few are? Is it the people who make the money? Like,
Yeah, the people who
if
have
you're
the money.
if you're wealthy, does that sort of
If you're part of the top 5%, then you're part of the caste system that he thinks should be making the decisions for the country. And to make that happen, he has to reshape the entire American government, which means stripping away worker protections, dismantling social programs, consolidating power at the top. You're starting to see that. So let me get into some of the specifics if you want to see like what he calls for in some of his writings.
sure?
This is called the Dark Enlightenment theory. These are the top 4 proposals that Yarvin has made in his writings. Number 1, this is how you go about making his ideas happen. Number 1, mass firings of career government employees, replacing them with ideological loyalists. Sound familiar? Number 2, dismantling or weakening regulatory agencies that protect workers, consumers, and the environment. Sound familiar? Number 3, restructuring the Justice Department and the FBI to align with his political goals. Sound familiar? Number 4, defunding public education, Social Security, and healthcare, pushing for privatization. Sound familiar? These
I mean, does he want to privatize everything?
I can't answer that. I don't know the specifics of whether he wants to privatize everything, but I know he wants to privatize social services and health.
Okay.
So Here are some of the darker concepts. He's got 5 basic dark concepts. Number 1, democracy is a failure. It breeds corruption, inefficiency, and decline. He argues that strong leaders should rule unchecked. It's best for the people. Number 2, he calls it the cathedral. The cathedral is mainstream media, universities, and government institutions work together to push liberal ideology and suppress dissent. He
That's
wants
what
to get
he,
he wants to get rid of the cathedral.
okay, so he believes that universities, the media, and who?
Government.
And government work together to promote this liberal ideology,
Right.
and that cathedral of three should be
Need,
dismantled.
correct. Number 3, a CEO style government. He envisions a single ruler or a technocrat elite making decisions without voter input or bureaucratic oversight. Number 4, privatized city states. He promotes a patchwork system of privatized city states or corporate controlled nations competing for citizens. I don't understand that one yet, so I'm not going to speak to it, but it sounds a little dystopian to me. The 5th thing he speaks a lot about is that a dark period of time is necessary while we dismantle democracy. It will require a period of chaos and collapse, paving the way for the centralized authoritarian rule. Now, part of that theory is do a lot and do it fast. You'll overwhelm the media, you'll overwhelm citizens. They won't be able to keep up. Number 2, pay no attention to any pushback from Congress, state legislation, judges, or the Supreme Court if necessary. Just keep doing it and dare them to stop you. That this period of chaos is part of the plan. Sound familiar? So who has fallen in love with Curtis Yarvin's ideas? The Heritage Foundation, which wrote Project 2025. Donald Trump and his inner circle now actively embrace the idea of expanding executive power. Elon Musk and what I call the SVO, the Silicon Valley oligarchs, they favor deregulation and streamlined corporate-like government. Why? Well, look what we have. We talk about on the show. We have hardly zero legislation, regulation, or any type of guardrails when it comes to social media, much of digital media, and AI. That's what they want. They want to keep it that way. Libertarian tech investors, some of our listeners may know Peter Thiel and Mark Anderson. These are
Mark Andreessen?
Mark Andreessen, I'm sorry, I mispronounced it. These are 2 of the most powerful people in Silicon Valley. They have the money. They are pushing for reduced federal oversight and privatization and have embraced Curtis Yarvin's theology. So why do they want to do this? Why do they want to do this, you say? Well, reduced regulations. Well, that weakens the labor protections, lowers wages, fewer benefits, and they can control workers a lot more easily. Privatizing government functions, billionaires now shape the policy which serve their interests. You can kind of see where we're going here, and the dots are, some of these things are already happening. So that's why we need to shine the light on this. All right, next question that always comes up when I talk about this or write about it and get feedback is, well, John, tell me why I should care. How is this going to affect me besides the obvious that it sounds dystopian? Well, number 1, if you are a blue collar worker, if you are a white collar worker that makes less than $250,000 a year, basically, if you're not the ultra rich, Workers' rights and wages will be undermined significantly. When it comes to minimum wage, overtime, workplace safety, it's going to be gutted. Corporations will now gain more power and could potentially exploit workers without any consequences. Curtis Yarvin loves that idea. Social Security and healthcare privatized. That means costs for you and I skyrocket for healthcare, retirement, etc. Voter suppression and loss of civil liberties. They don't want voting. Stricter voting laws. So little by little, they want to make it more difficult to vote. Dissent and protest will be criminalized, aggressively monitored. Sounds like Russia, quite frankly.
Or China.
Yep. Corporate power will expand. They believe in the idea that the corporate structures are very efficient and basically should be applied to a country. And so while the corporate powers expand and wages stagnate, deregulations increase. This increases wealth inequality. Any economist will tell you this. Therefore, the billionaires become wealthier, the rest of us, not so much. Part of that plan is public schools, education, infrastructure, and social programs will get their funding cut such that only private schools, etc., will be able to, educate at the level that, probably is normal.
It's
or
required for people
is
to
required.
move up
Yeah,
on
if you can't go to,
socioeconomic strata.
yeah, if you can't go to a private school, you're screwed. All right. So in addition to all this, there is a timeline. So in their plan, and this is really, really important. In Curtis Yarvin's writings, he has a playbook. So I published on Substack in my part 3. What's his playbook? What's the timeline? We should know, because if you know the playbook, it's like I love sports. Well, if I know what the other team's going to do, no excuse if I'm not ready. So here's his playbook. Phase 1, immediate executive action, 2025 to 2026. Here are the goals. Centralize power as best as possible. Dismantle oversight. Notice how we got rid of all the inspector generals? What do you think getting rid of inspector generals is all about? That's dismantling oversight. So, what takes place in 2025 through 2026? Number 1, mass firings and agency restructuring, happening right now. The top targets: Department of Justice, FBI, the IRS, Social Security, and Department of Education. Gee, are we seeing that already? So as I'm seeing this playbook that he wrote a while ago, and I'm watching the news, I would be derelict in my duties if I'm not going, okay, I need to find out more here and share this, because this is absolutely important. Okay, number 2, during 2025 and 26, rollback of worker and consumer protections. Weaken financial oversight. Number 3, economic shifts through large tax cuts that favor the wealthy. So start looking. This is what's coming. This is what they want to do next, and we've heard about it. Corporate tax cuts, but nothing to do with improving the lives of cutting tax cuts for blue-collar people, rural, people who live in the cities who don't make a lot of money. They're left out of the picture. Number 3, surveillance and dissent crackdown. This is under the guise of domestic surveillance, security, to get rid of, to promote anti-woke extremism, as they call it. When we see Elon Musk buying Twitter, when we see the Silicon Valley oligarchs in charge of all the platforms, including maybe some AI tools that we're on, and that's how they're going to be able to surveil us. That's their plan. I know this. What's crazy Amber's,
I feel like you're talking, and you can see that as you're talking, you sound like a lunatic conspiracy theorist,
I
or
know
you are afraid, not afraid, but like you can see how you sound like a lunatic conspiracy
a
theorist.
hundred percent.
But a lot of this is already happening.
That's
And
what
I
got my
think
attention.
people have I feel like people are I feel like there are two things going on. One, people are dispirited and defeated and frustrated and are opting out in favor, in sort of in an effort to take care of themselves and not get mired in some kind of national depression.
Right.
And I
And
feel like the second part of it is people are lulled into complacency, believing that the government is going to kick in, that the safeguards that have always been there in our government are going to at some point kick in and save us all. That we are somehow protected from this happening here.
yeah, and I want to look at my
And I
notes.
think that's dangerous because I don't know that we are protected from this happening here. Clearly, I mean, we're already obviously not as protected as I would have thought we were.
Now. So we've connected the dots. I haven't gone down the rat hole, but we've stopped at a place where, Amber, you're absolutely right. I feel like I am the anti-conspiracy theory guy. I hate conspiracy theories. So I was very aware that going down and doing this research, I needed some evidence that said this isn't a conspiracy theory. But when I saw the playbook that he published, and then I see what's happening through the first 5 weeks, okay, it's not so much of a conspiracy theory if it's actually happening. And if it's not actually happening, either Trump or Musk is actually talking about doing the next steps in the playbook. So it can't be a conspiracy
Right. It
theory if it's
sounds
happening.
like this is not something that they're hiding. This
No,
is
and I think that's
happening in plain
right.
sight.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point. It's happening in plain sight. They're promoting it on social channels, uh, etc. So it's happening. But to your point, Americans may feel overwhelmed. They may feel depressed. They may feel tired because this is a lot. There's a lot that's been thrown at a lot of us in the last 5 weeks, and people are understandably tired or worn down. What's important, and it's one of the reasons I'm doing this work, is okay, go. It's okay for people to be tired. I have a lot of energy right now, so let me do what I can do to shine the light on this, spread the information, try to keep people motivated until we can get our energy back. Now, before I go into the last pieces that are important to know of what Yarvin wants to do in his playbook and what we can all do, I think it's important to know that we're already starting to see some data on social media where Americans who are Republicans, um, who live in red counties or states or districts, or conservative business people, they're not happy because they're realizing that the execution of the plans they've seen so far are not benefiting them. They're benefiting the ultra wealthy only. So, for example, there was a town hall meeting in Georgia, outside Atlanta, I believe, last night, where a Republican congressman had his town hall. He's home for the weekend, 4-day weekend. It's a Trump county. It's been Republican for years, and the citizens of the county were extremely angry. They pummeled him with questions. They called Trump basically a lunatic, and that all these job cuts that Elon Musk is executing with his Doge team is unfair, un-American, unconstitutional. And they were telling their congressman, don't just go back to Washington and support Trump no matter what he says. We need you to stand up for us. We're getting run over here like a steamroller. People are losing their jobs. So we're starting to see people realize this has never been about um, people who,
Well,
it's never been about blue collar. It's never been about rural.
helping the common
No,
man
no.
or
This is only
for the
about,
greater good or this. No,
yeah.
okay.
They've sold them a bill of goods, and now it's really, we're starting to see it because we can see it happening. No longer just those of us in the media or at universities speculating based upon theory. No, we're seeing it happen. So when you see people in a very Republican district very angry, now you're starting to see it. So let me get back to what we can do. I think I'm going to go last to first. I think one of the most important things that we can do is um, first shine the light on what's going on, educate people, have conversations. I've had people at the gym, on campus, who are Republicans, who are conservatives, come up to me and go, "Oh, I started reading about Curtis Yarvin. I see what's going on. I'm not happy. I don't like this guy Elon Musk and what he's doing. I'm not happy." So
So hold on, just
yeah, yeah.
slow your roll for a minute.
All right.
If you're a listener, one of the things you can do to maybe feel involved, but not, you know, not be involved to the extent that John is involved, because I think you're, like on the front lines at this point. You're creating content on several different platforms, but one way to, um, and look, there may be people who support Curtis Yarvin and this whole and Project
Right.
2025 and are all for it, in which case, by all means, be for it. But it's important that people understand that and that light is being shined upon it. So maybe share your opinion, share or just share even without an opinion, share the content, share the New York Times article, share John's Substack, share this podcast, um, and in some small way, feel like you're part of the movement.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, Amber. And that's really the intent of the articles is, and I started off saying this at the beginning of today's show. I don't want people to think it's just Donald Trump being Donald Trump, or it's Elon Musk. He started Tesla and these other companies, and he knows how to run a business, and he's a little wacky. I don't want. That's not what this is about. It's about the fact that they have bought into Curtis Yarvin's theories and his writings.
Are they openly connected to Curtis Yarvin?
He was at the inauguration, and he's very. I think the way they frame it is he tries to keep a little bit of a distance because he's a lot. He's a lot like many of these Silicon Valley oligarchs. He's beyond nerdy. He's not social. He does his writings probably in a closet. I'm joking, but maybe not. Um, but he is friends now with JD Vance. That's his best buddy.
Okay.
He's openly in
So there
meetings.
are open connections to the
Yeah,
current government.
yeah, yeah. JD
Okay.
Vance and JD Vance speaks about him, so it's there.
Okay.
Um,
So getting back, I'd like to finish up on, because I like to finish up on a
yeah, what we
positive
can
note.
do.
Yeah.
So here's what's important because I think where there is a window of over the next year and maybe a little bit of the year in year two, but as we get to the midterms in 2 years, there's a window where we can stop this and get to a place where we can have debates. So let me walk through some of the things. I think there has to be, number one, an alliance created between the middle and the left and the independents. So if you have friends, like let's say you didn't support Trump and you lean left and you have friends or coworkers that are more center or right, we need to unite. We need to care about the Constitution. We need to if you believe this, we need to come together to defend democracy and the system that we have in place and try to make it better. Clearly, no one's against trying to make it better because it's imperfect. But we need to have an alliance where we're
So
not
it sounds
yelling.
like
Yeah,
What
we
you're
don't want to
saying
be
is
yelling at each other.
open up communication with groups of
100%.
people that you might not have been interested in talking to up until now.
Well, the
Maybe
way
people Maybe
yeah,
people who did vote for Trump.
exactly.
Maybe people who didn't vote at all. People who are not happy with the choices that they were given. Um, and in the past, I think a lot of us on the left, or whatever you want to call us, have sort of written off those people as Nazis. And I think that has to stop. I think
That
that really has to stop, and we have to um, open up the lines of communication and start having some of these conversations with people that you might not have had conversations with in the past. You might have written off as hopeless.
so even if it means setting aside a certain partisan priority that you may have had, or someone who's
Maybe
a
you don't agree on guns, or you don't agree
right,
on right to life,
those
or
things need to be set aside to come together as an alliance to defeat what is an imminent problem right now facing us.
right.
So that's number one. Open the lines of communication and create alliances and coalitions that in the past you may not have. Number two, supporting a free press and an independent media. So if you've noticed, a lot of the respected journalists that worked at CNN or Fox or MSNBC or CBS, etc., have left. And they are now creating their own independent media outlets. Many of them are on Substack, which is why I joined, because I see a lot of Republicans, Democrats, and independents out there creating their own media channel because they want to get away from um, a controlled media, which
And I
uh,
want to be really clear about what this means.
yeah, you can say this better than me. Go ahead.
This may mean spending money on people, subscribing to with people who have for pay Substacks or
Right.
other for
My
pay
Substack is
channels.
free because I'm in no position to charge anybody at this point in time. But
But there are other
right,
people
right.
who sort of political thinkers or analysts or uh, and it's important to support them financially, because so maybe you don't subscribe to the Washington Post anymore, but you put your money into 5 or 10 different people on Substack who are creating content that you think is important.
Bingo, exactly. All right. Number three, civic participation. So what this means is, I know not everybody can get involved at the level we get involved, but I think change happens from the town up, not from Washington down. So go to your town hall meetings, like these Republicans did in Georgia last night or the night before. Go to your town meetings and advocate for democratic values, and go there with the intention of being uh, having a coalition with people who are Republicans who oppose these Curtis Yarvin principles, and say, hey, look, we can work together. I may not get everything I want. You may not get everything you want, but it's more important that we hold our democracy together. Let's form a team. So get involved in your town where it's
Sort of
appropriate for
local
you.
politics,
Yep.
whatever local politics means to you.
Yep. And wherever you can in your local town, promote voter registration and participation. We don't want people who are who are shouldn't be voting. I get all that, but we also don't want to make it
But
difficult.
that is not a problem.
I
Currently,
know,
right now,
I know.
we do not have a problem where people who are not citizens, or people who are, I don't even know who
It
everybody
was
thinks should
all
be disenfranchised, but
that
convicted felons, I'm not sure who these people
I know,
are that everybody thinks are voting that shouldn't be voting. We have the opposite problem.
I know.
People are not voting who should be voting.
Well, only about 50% of Americans voted even in a presidential election. So what's that
So
tell
whatever you can do to encourage
you?
voter participation.
The other, so those are two of the three things that we can do that aren't that difficult, but you can do a little bit here, a little bit there. Number two, there's
Number
two,
three.
excuse
We're on
me?
number three now.
Well, civic participation. We went coalition, free press, civic participation.
Now we're on three or four. We're not on
Four.
two.
I know math's not your jam.
I'm sorry, you're the one who had the wrong number, and it's your list. Math is not my jam.
All right. Rule of law. So I think people should hold some optimism that state courts, some federal courts, etc. These actions that Trump and Musk are taking can be slowed down. And the goal is kind of like in sports, slow them down, try to run out the clock, try to prevent as many, things from happening as you possibly can. So the court systems still have some power at this point in time. So that's something we can hold on to at least for the moment. States, state and local resistance matters. We live in a republic. 50 states have rights. So support your governors, support your state legislatures to create and protect the rights that you feel might be threatened. So this is what part of the get involved in local politics. Send people to your state house in Sacramento or Hartford, Connecticut, or wherever that you believe will support democracy, whether they are Republicans or Democrats or independents. Send people there that will stand up for the average citizen. So we have the court system and we have the states. That's a pillar that is still holding right now, which is great. Separation of powers. So this is the one at risk right now. The first separation of powers is, we have the executive branch, we have the legislature, we have the judicial. They're trying to make, if you notice, what Trump does all the time is executive orders. Executive orders only matter while that president is in office. They don't hold water after those 4 years because he doesn't want to appear weak and go through the legislative process because he's going to lose more than he's going to win. So he avoids that by doing executive orders. But the legislative oversight is struggling because they're all falling in line behind Trump right now. This is where local pressure on congressmen and congresswomen can come in handy, because if Americans at the local level can pressure Congress, the
So
people
this might, what this looks like, just so you know, like and I'm sorry to interrupt and
yeah,
break it down, but I want to get really granular here. What
yeah,
this looks like when we say put pressure on your congressman or your senator, it might be making a phone call or writing a letter, an electronic letter and sending an email. And it's pretty easy to do. It's not super time consuming. And it makes a big difference.
it does
So
make a
make
difference.
that phone call, sign that letter, and feel good about the fact that you're doing something.
Give you an example of how it works. When the Doge team, Musk's little brown shirts that are running around out there, when they laid off all these federal workers don't just work in Washington, D.C. Federal workers are all over the country. They work in red states and blue states. When they started laying off a lot of people, there was data that showed that there were more phone calls coming into Congress and the White House than had come in years. They were being overwhelmed by people of all,
Political,
political persuasions
yeah.
who were pissed off, and that caused a lot of the slowdown to happen, whatever slowdown there was. And you're even seeing some voices in the Republican Party come out now, like with the Ukraine
Right.
situation. They're starting to see your local congressperson and your local senator that goes to Washington. They only have the guts to find their voice if they know the people back home are behind them.
Because that's how they're going to lose their seat.
Correct. And they know that they're up against all the money coming in from Musk and the Silicon Valley oligarchs. They know that if they come out against Trump, that they're at great risk.
They have a
On,
lot to lose.
they
So
have a lot to lose.
show them that they have a
Correct.
lot to lose at home.
Correct. So they're only going to find their voice if people back home make that phone call you spoke of.
Right.
And the last piece is holding on to judicial independence. So let's avoid the Supreme Court for the moment because we know how Trump has rigged that. There are a lot of federal judges that were appointed by Trump many years ago that are pausing a lot of his actions because they know it's not constitutional. So a lot of these judges, even though they're Republicans or conservatives and tend to support Trump, they're even holding the line at the moment. So let's hope that the judicial independence, anything we can do to support and defend the judiciary's role is really going to be important for any executive overreach. So anyway, those are the 5 categories.
So I think that's good. I think that's sort of as much as Curtis Yarvin has a playbook and 2025 is a playbook, I think it would be great. And I know you've done a little bit of this on your Substack, but it's just a playbook for the common person, for the average
Yeah, it is.
Joe.
And if you go to my Substack, johnmurphymedia.substack.com, part 3 is the playbook and the timeline. You'll see the project plan, how it's laid out over 10 years to turn America away from democracy and into this dystopian.
But I think, and that can be overwhelming when you see that, there's all this stuff happening. So I think it's important to have like a smaller playbook for day-to-day stuff that anyone can do.
Yeah, and I think if we just focus on the here and now, like for the next 12 months, the next 6 months, okay, we see what's happening. Here's what we can do. Here's what they want to do. If we can all kind of align and agree that we like the United States of America, we like where we live, we like our neighbors, whether they're Republicans or Democrats or independents, and we want to make it better, but we don't want to end it. I think we just focus on that and are kinder to each other, knowing what's really going on behind the scenes. Hey, there's hope.
Educate yourself and stay involved as much as you can while taking care of yourself.
Yeah, so that wraps up today's show, where I just finished that 4-part series on Curtis Yarvin. So I want to make sure I share that with everybody before we go into the next episodes, where we get back to the other digital dilemmas of our times and things that we can do and some of the great things with technology. But I wanted to make sure, I think now is a good time. The timing was right with what's going on and a lot of people losing their jobs. I wanted to share this and do this episode.
Very timely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for listening. And as always, if you have any input regarding guests or topics that you would like to see featured, please feel free to send that to digitaldilemmas@lenk.media. And we will incorporate that as we plan our 2nd season. Thank you so much.
All right, Digital Dilemma fans, that wraps up another episode. Thanks for tuning in and navigating our tech world with us.
Please rate us and leave a review. And if you enjoyed it, tune in next time. We'd also love it if you would send us any questions or suggest guests via email. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
Digital Dilemmas is a Lenk Media original podcast.